The first thing I noticed wasn't the pain. It wasn't even the blood pooling warm against my gums. It was the cold, that unforgiving ceramic tile pressed against my cheek, pulling heat from my skin like it had every right to take what little I had left. Metal coated my tongue, thick and sharp, while my ribs screamed with every shallow breath I managed to pull in. I blinked hard, vision swimming, and that's when I saw them, Declan's shoes. Expensive leather barely scuffed just inches from my face. He wasn't speaking, wasn't helping. He just stood there for one long moment, like he was deciding if I was worth the inconvenience. Then he stepped over my legs like I was furniture he'd tripped over and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Casual. Final. My phone buzzed against the floor. Screen cracked but still glowing. One message from Belle. "Stay away from us." I typed back one word. Done. I didn't cry right away. Something inside me had shifted, quiet but seismic, like tectonic plates finally letting go after years of pressure. It wasn't that I stopped loving my sister in that moment. It was that I stopped begging her to love me back. I pulled myself up using the counter, every muscle protesting, every breath a reminder that I was still here, still alive, still capable of something. Mariah answered on the second ring. I couldn't speak at first, just choked on sobs I didn't know I'd been holding. When I finally told her what happened, her voice cut through the fog with sharp clarity. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Camille. It's assault. You need to report it." She stayed on the line while I stumbled to the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back didn't look like me, but maybe it was time she did. This didn't start with Declan's fist. It didn't even start with Belle's silence. It started years ago in smaller, quieter ways, back when being overlooked was called keeping the peace. I was always the one who made things easier. The daughter who got straight A's without needing praise, who packed her own snacks for family road trips so mom wouldn't stress, who folded laundry at 14 because Belle wasn't good at it. I stayed quiet at Sunday dinners when Dad was tired, swallowed my accomplishments so they wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Belle was different. She was sunshine, even when she did nothing at all. I still remember the year she got hired at a boutique in the Woodfield Mall outside Chicago. My mother acted like she'd been featured in Forbes. "She's finding herself," Mom told every neighbor, every cousin, every church friend who'd listen. That same week, I'd been promoted to lead UX designer for a national campaign at a tech startup downtown. When I shared the news over pot roast and mashed potatoes, Mom smiled thinly and said, "That's great, honey, but don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Marriage, family, you know." My achievements were acceptable as long as they stayed small, as long as they didn't cast shadows. And Belle got engaged to Declan. The family exploded with joy. Finally, Mom whispered to me at the engagement party, champagne fizzing in her glass. "She's got her future in place. Now we just need to find someone for you." Like I was a project left unfinished. Like my life without a ring was an error needing correction. That's when it really clicked. I wasn't their daughter. I was their contingency plan, their extra set of hands, the one they leaned on when things fell apart and forgot when they didn't. And I'd let it happen. I'd folded myself smaller and smaller until all that remained was the version of me that kept everything running smoothly. But lying on that cold tile, reading Belle's text, I realized something that shattered years of conditioning. I had been built to be forgotten, and I was finally ready to disappear on my own terms. I reached for my phone again, not to text back, but to check something else. The mortgage pre-approval was still sitting in my inbox, flagged and waiting. $820,000 conditionally approved, co-signed by me. It had started months earlier when Belle and Declan came to me panicking about financing. They'd been denied once already. Declan's credit history read like a warning label: 2 failed business ventures within 3 years. Collections, late payments, the works. Belle was freelancing, her income sporadic, her tax records a mess of inconsistent deposits. They needed someone stable, someone dependable. They needed me. "We just need your name on the paperwork," Belle had said, her voice smooth and easy, like it wasn't asking me to risk everything. "You won't be responsible unless something goes wrong." I helped anyway. Sat with Declan for hours combing through his credit report, walked him through dispute letters, even connected them with my mortgage broker. I fronted the move-in deposit when Belle's client payment was delayed. No contract, no repayment schedule, just faith, just family. When I voiced my concerns, softly and carefully, Belle waved them off. "You're being so dramatic. It's just paperwork." Declan had laughed, clinking his beer against mine. "You're like the third wheel we actually need." At the time, I convinced myself it was a compliment. That being needed was love. But standing there now, ribs throbbing, I saw it all differently. Every favor, every signature, every dollar hadn't drawn us closer. It had tied me down, not as a sister, but as collateral. The next morning, I moved like I was made of glass. Slow, deliberate, careful. My body screamed with every step, but my mind had never been clearer. There was no fog anymore, no second guessing. I opened my laptop and signed into the bank portal. The mortgage file sat at the top, glowing with bureaucratic finality. $820,000, approved conditionally, my name stamped across every page. The pre-approval letter, the liability breakdown, the 15-year repayment schedule. Without me, they were just a couple with bad credit and a dream they couldn't afford. I started the revocation process. It wasn't a simple click. First came the identity verification, then a phone notification I had to confirm. A warning flashed across the screen in red letters. "This action may result in cancellation of the loan agreement. Proceed only if you understand the legal and financial consequences." I clicked yes. Another pop-up appeared. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Then came the security questions, each one a small knife. My first pet's name. Easy. My mother's maiden name. That one stung, but I typed it anyway. The final screen was a legal form, dry and clinical, outlining the terms of guarantor withdrawal. At the bottom sat a digital signature line. One signature to undo every time I'd chosen them over myself. I rested my fingers on the mouse. They'd expected me to keep giving, to stay silent, to leave my name attached even after they'd torn me apart. But I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their insurance policy. I clicked sign. A small green checkmark appeared, followed by the words, "Your guarantor agreement has been successfully withdrawn." I closed the laptop and let the silence settle around me. It wasn't heavy. It was clean. Somewhere across Chicago, they were probably finalizing centerpieces or comparing paint samples for the master bedroom. They had no idea the foundation of their dream house had just evaporated. And I wasn't finished. The call came just after noon. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Declan's voice exploded through the speaker, high-pitched and panicked, nothing like the man who'd stood smug in my kitchen 2 nights before. "Camille, what the hell did you do?" he barked, breathless. "The bank called. They said the guarantor pulled out. The loan's been denied. You killed this deal. Do you even understand what you've done?" I let the silence stretch, let it grow thick and uncomfortable until I could hear him shifting on the other end. Then I answered, calm and clear. "I did exactly what Belle asked. I'm staying away." I hung up before he could respond, before he could twist it into something I'd have to defend. An hour later, the banging started. Not knocking, banging. My front door rattled under their fists like they were trying to break through. I watched from the peephole as Belle paced the hallway, eyes wild, hair falling loose from the ponytail she always wore to look effortlessly perfect. "Camille, open this door right now!" she screamed, voice cracking. "You are ruining everything!" Declan stood behind her, trying to soften the performance, trying to sound reasonable. "Just talk to us," he called out, gentler now. "Please, think about Mom. Think about everything we've all been through together." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stood behind that door and watched them unravel, watched the mask slip, watched desperation claw its way to the surface. When they finally left, their voices trailing down the stairwell in angry whispers, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it Court Evidence. One by one, I added the files, photos of my face, The swelling around my jaw, the dark purple bruise spreading across my ribs, the split in my lip that would scar. Screenshot of Belle's text message. The withdrawal confirmation from the bank, time-stamped and official. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. I was doing it because I knew people like them. People who'd twist a story until the truth suffocated under layers of guilt and reputation and family obligation. My phone rang again the next morning. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. By the fourth, I answered. Her voice was tight, sharp with frustration. "Camille? What is going on? Belle told me you pulled your name from the loan. Are you really willing to destroy your sister's future over a disagreement?" A disagreement. The word hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to ask if she knew about the bruises, about the punch, about the way Belle had stood there and watched. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. "You've always been so dramatic," she continued, her voice rising. "You push people away and then act like the victim. I raised 2 daughters, and I will not let one tear the other down out of spite." I hung up. No explanation, no defense, just silence. A few hours later, my Aunt Carol called. I hadn't spoken to her in months. She didn't even say hello, just launched right in. "Your mother told me everything. I'm just so disappointed in you, Camille. Your sister is under so much stress. The wedding, the house, it's a lot. You should be supporting her, not punishing her." That was the moment it all crystallized. This wasn't about a punch or a mortgage. It was about roles. Belle was the one who stumbled, and I was the one who stayed quiet. That was the balance they all depended on, the system they'd built and maintained. They weren't calling to understand. They were calling to restore order, but I wasn't returning to it. I blocked their numbers, every single one, and added the voicemails to the folder. It wasn't just Belle and Declan anymore. It was the entire system, and I was done playing my part. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon, thick and official, stamped with Cook County Courthouse ink. A temporary restraining order filed by Belle. I read it once, then again, and still couldn't process what it said. According to her sworn statement, I was unstable, obsessed, and had violently confronted her out of jealousy over her engagement. She called me dangerous, a threat to her safety. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of the lie. She was trying to flip the script, to make me the villain in the very story where I'd bled on my own kitchen floor. But I had something she didn't count on. I had evidence, and I had Aya Connors. My lawyer was sharp, composed, and unflinching. She knew exactly what we were walking into. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, but packed with tension. Belle sat in the front row, dabbing at eyes that stayed completely dry. Declan was beside her, lips pressed into a thin, serious line. My mother sat 2 rows back, arms crossed, refusing to even glance in my direction. Their attorney opened with practiced sympathy, voice dripping with concern as he painted me as a vindictive younger sister hell-bent on destroying a happy couple's future. He twisted every fact into suspicion, every choice I'd made into evidence of obsession. My withdrawal from the mortgage became financial manipulation. My silence became calculated cruelty. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, and for a moment, I felt the old doubt creeping back in. The voice that whispered maybe I was overreacting, maybe I should have just kept quiet. Then it was our turn. Aya didn't grandstand. She didn't need to. She simply laid out the facts, one after another, clean and undeniable. First, the photographs. High resolution, time-stamped, metadata intact. My face swollen and bruised, the dark purple spreading across my ribs, the split in my lower lip that required 4 stitches. Then came the medical report from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Blunt force trauma, internal bruising consistent with a closed fist strike, defensive wounds on my forearms. The attending physician's notes were clinical and devastating. Finally, the security footage. My apartment building's hallway camera had caught just enough. The video was grainy, silent, but it didn't need sound. It showed Belle and Declan arriving at my door. It showed raised voices, aggressive postures. It showed me stepping back, hands up. It showed Declan lunge forward, it showed me hit the ground, and it showed them both walk away. The courtroom went completely still. You could hear breathing, the rustle of fabric, the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Belle's lawyer shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested in the papers in front of him. The judge leaned forward, glasses perched on her nose, and turned to Belle and Declan with an expression that could freeze water. She let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone squirm. Then she spoke, voice sharp and final. "Petition denied. And consider yourself fortunate, Miss Reyes, that the petitioner here isn't filing criminal charges, because from where I'm sitting, she'd have a very strong case." Belle's face went white. Declan stared straight ahead, jaw tight. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. I didn't celebrate. I just gathered my things, nodded at Aya, and walked out with Mariah at my side. But the hallway wasn't empty. Belle was waiting just outside the courtroom doors, shoulders tense, mascara smudged just enough to look accidental. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, there was no certainty behind them. Just fear. Just desperation. "Camille," she said, voice low and shaky. "Can we just talk? Please?" I didn't stop walking. She caught up, reaching lightly for my arm. I pulled back instinctively. "I didn't know it would get this far," she said quickly, words tumbling over each other. Declan said we needed to protect ourselves, and I thought—" The sentence collapsed under its own weight. I turned just enough to face her fully, and when I spoke, my voice was calm, steady, final. "You stood there. You let him hit me. You watched me on the floor, and you said nothing. And then you called me dangerous." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "You are no longer my sister." It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was simply the truth. And something in her recognized it. She just stood there, small and wordless, as I walked away. Outside, the late autumn air was sharp and clean. Mariah was waiting by the car, and when I slid into the passenger seat, neither of us spoke. She just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near mine. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight begin to lift. A year passed, not quickly, but gently, like a season I'd finally stopped resisting. I poured myself into work, not to forget, but to remember what I was actually capable of when I wasn't carrying everyone else's weight. I led a major product launch for our platform redesign, took over as department head, and stopped apologizing for being good at what I did. On Tuesday nights, I started taking a ceramics class at the community center in Lincoln Park. My hands learned to shape clay, to apply pressure without breaking, to hold something fragile and make it strong. The clay didn't care about my past. It just responded to consistency, patience, and intention. By November, my apartment had transformed. It was warm now, filled with the hum of voices and laughter that felt real. I hosted Friendsgiving for the first time in my life. Mariah brought 3 bottles of wine and her famous cranberry sauce. Nate, a friend from work, made a weirdly perfect turkey that none of us expected to turn out so well. We sat on mismatched chairs around my tiny dining table and passed food over stories that made us laugh until our stomachs hurt. It was everything my family dinners had never been. Honest, easy, safe. Then, last week, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Neat, looping, unmistakably Belle's. I didn't open it right away. I didn't need to. That night, I stood over the recycling bin in my kitchen and quietly tore the envelope in half, then in quarters. There was no anger in the gesture, no ceremony, just finality. Out on my balcony, the small cactus I'd bought the week after the court hearing had bloomed. A single pink flower sat perched at the top, small but impossibly defiant, like a flag planted on new ground. I watered it slowly, then sat down beside it, legs tucked beneath me, and just listened. The wind, the distant traffic, the sound of my own breathing, steady and unafraid. I used to think strength meant never cracking, never showing weakness, never letting anyone see you bend. Now I know better. Strength isn't about staying whole. It's about what you choose to grow in the cracks. And I'm growing something beautiful. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family? Hit that subscribe button for more real, raw storytelling, and don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it. You're stronger than you think.
Shut your mouth and stay out of our family matters. My dad's voice echoed through the apartment as he tightened the bolts on the new sofa, sweat dripping down his forehead. My sister sat on the floor, scrolling through her phone, while her kids ran around, oblivious to the chaos they caused. Suddenly, without warning, Dad stormed into my room, grabbed my suitcase, and hurled it into the hallway, scattering my belongings everywhere. "Useless fellow, don't come here again," he bellowed, pointing aggressively toward the open door. "My name is Maya, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Like the air you breathe is a privilege they grant you?" I stood there frozen, humiliation tightening my chest as neighbors poked their heads out of their doors, whispering and shaking their heads. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the weight of shame kept me silent. Dad had always been harsh, but today he crossed a line I didn't know existed until this moment. "I'm sorry," I whispered quietly, bending down to gather my scattered clothes. My sister looked up briefly from her phone, then returned to scrolling as if I was invisible, irrelevant. Her silence stung deeper than Dad's words ever could. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands with a stained towel. Her eyes flickered toward me, disappointment etched deep into her face. "You shouldn't upset your father, Maya. He's under enough stress as it is." The familiar ache of betrayal burned inside me. Always the problem, never the solution. That was my role in their lives. I finished packing quickly, refusing to let them see my tears, and turned toward the door. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me hard, emphasizing just how alone I truly was. But then, as I stood helplessly staring at the spilled contents of my life scattered across the hallway, footsteps echoed loudly from the stairwell. The voices in the apartment quieted, the whispers of neighbors faded, and a tall figure emerged from around the corner. My heart froze as recognition dawned on me. It was Alex, my childhood best friend, the one person I'd always tried to shield from the chaos of my family life. The one who moved away years ago and swore never to come back to this place. "What's going on here?" Alex's voice was calm yet firm, carrying the authority that immediately silenced the room behind me. My dad stepped out, still gripping his wrench tightly, defiance in his eyes. "Family matter, Alex. Doesn't concern you." Alex's eyes narrowed, unwavering. "Anything involving Maya concerns me, especially when her dignity is involved." I felt the warmth of relief wash over me, battling against my humiliation. Alex bent down beside me, gently collecting my belongings. "This isn't how you treat someone who's sacrificed everything for your comfort," Alex said sharply, addressing my father without even looking at him. My father's face turned crimson. My sister finally lifted her gaze, uncomfortable under Alex's piercing stare. "Come on," Alex whispered to me, handing me the last shirt from the floor. "You deserve better than this." As we turned away, leaving my stunned family behind, I felt something shift inside me. It was subtle but powerful, the first spark of strength. They thought they had silenced me forever, but they were wrong. Because now I finally had someone in my corner. And that changed everything. Alex guided me gently out of the building and into the crisp evening air. Every step away from that suffocating apartment loosened the knots tightening in my chest, yet the echoes of humiliation lingered stubbornly in my heart. "You okay?" Alex finally asked, breaking the silence that hung heavy between us. I swallowed hard, staring down at the cracked pavement beneath my feet. "Define okay." Alex nodded, understanding without me having to elaborate. I remember how it was growing up. The shouting, the unfair expectations, your endless apologies for things that weren't your fault. It never sat right with me. My throat tightened, memories flooding back in relentless waves. For as long as I could recall, I'd existed only in shadows, tiptoeing around my family's unpredictable moods. My sister, Elena, had always been the favored child, the golden one who could do no wrong. Her mistakes were excused as youthful mishaps, while my smallest errors were evidence of inherent flaws. "You know," I began softly, "when Mom got sick a few years ago, Dad insisted I quit college to care for her. Elena said she had her own life and couldn't help. I didn't even hesitate, Alex. I left everything, my dreams, my future, to be there. I bathed Mom, fed her, stayed awake through the long nights when she cried from pain. Alex stopped walking, turning to face me, their eyes filled with sympathy and anger. And they still treat you like this? I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in my ears. When Mom recovered, she thanked Elena for her emotional support. Dad praised her resilience, told her she was a hero for dealing with so much stress. And me? I was just the obedient caretaker. Expected, not appreciated. Alex shook their head in disgust. They've always been blind to your worth, Maya. You've spent your entire life giving to people who can't see past themselves. I sighed deeply, memories resurfacing painfully. I used to think if I just did more, tried harder, they'd see me. I cleaned the house, cooked meals, babysat Elena's kids for free, hoping one day they'd notice I was there, trying to earn their love. But love isn't supposed to feel like this. Alex gently touched my shoulder, a comforting warmth radiating from their hand. You're right. Love isn't transactional. It's not conditional. And it sure as hell doesn't humiliate you. I nodded, the truth of their words hitting deep. Tonight wasn't even the worst, Alex. It was just another night, another reminder. My voice trembled as I recounted the endless cycle of emotional blows, the quiet dismissals, the casual insults masked as jokes, and the times I was made invisible at family gatherings, told to remain silent and not embarrass them. I think the saddest part, I whispered, looking directly into Alex's compassionate eyes, is realizing I'd started believing them. Believing I really was useless, pathetic, a burden. Alex took my hand firmly, squeezing reassuringly. You're none of those things, Maya. You're kind, strong, resilient. You're someone who deserves respect and love, not this. I exhaled slowly, the weight of years finally shifting. Alex was the first person to genuinely see me, to see past the lies I'd been told about myself. You know, Alex said quietly, their voice steady, you don't owe them your silence or your forgiveness. They've made you feel small because they fear what you'll become if you realize how powerful you actually are. A spark ignited within me, tiny, fragile, but undeniably present. I'm done being their doormat. Alex smiled warmly, pride shimmering in their eyes. Then let's show them exactly who you can be. Tonight marked the beginning of something new. My family believed they had silenced me, shattered me into submission. But they were about to learn just how loudly I could roar. Over the next few days, Alex helped me settle into their small, cozy apartment, miles away from the emotional debris of my old life. I spent hours sifting through job listings and reworking my neglected resume, determined to rebuild the dignity my family had shredded. But even as I tried to move forward, unsettling truths lingered in the back of my mind. It started with a simple notification on my phone, a credit alert. Your card ending in 3498 was charged $850. My stomach twisted. My father still had access to that account, a leftover from when I managed household expenses. Anger bubbled through me, followed swiftly by suspicion. What's wrong? Alex asked, noticing my tense expression. My dad, I muttered bitterly, eyes fixed on my phone. He just spent almost $1,000 on my credit card. Alex frowned deeply, concern flickering in their eyes. You still have joint accounts? I sighed, frustration seeping through my voice. I was stupid enough to believe they'd be responsible. I trusted they'd never abuse it. Another mistake. Alex leaned closer, their voice gentle but firm. Maya, you need to cut those ties immediately. They're clearly taking advantage of you. I nodded slowly, realization washing over me like ice water. For years, I'd accepted being exploited emotionally. Now, staring at this blatant financial betrayal, I finally recognized how deeply their disrespect ran. It wasn't just about feelings. They'd built their comfort on my sacrifices, always counting on my silence. Determined, I spent the afternoon closing shared accounts and changing passwords, each step feeling liberating. But as I secured my financial independence, deeper suspicions arose. Dad had always insisted our family was barely scraping by, yet he'd just purchased expensive furniture for Elena, using my money. I couldn't shake the sense there was more hidden beneath the surface. Late that night, sleep eluded me. Restless, I dug through old emails and documents I'd long ignored, hunting for anything suspicious. Within minutes, my pulse quickened. An unopened email from a bank I'd never used caught my eye. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. "Congratulations, Ms. Maya Reed. Your new joint account with Mr. Robert Reed has been successfully created. Current balance, $18,250. My breath stalled in disbelief. Dad had opened an account, using my name, my identity, my credit. He'd hidden money, likely siphoned from the family funds I'd managed, into an account I had no knowledge of. My heart pounded furiously as betrayal morphed into something darker, recognition. The pieces snapped into place. My forced silence, their harsh dismissals, the relentless humiliation. It had all been carefully orchestrated to keep me powerless and unaware. If I doubted myself, I'd never question them. Alex emerged sleepily from their room, sensing something wrong. "Maya, why are you still awake?" Tears blurred my vision, but anger sharpened my voice. "They stole from me, Alex. More than money. They stole my trust, my dignity, my future." Alex crossed the room instantly, embracing me tightly as sobs shook my body. "They'll never hurt you again," they whispered fiercely. "We're going to expose everything." In that moment, clarity crystallized within me. My family thrived on deceit, manipulation, and my perpetual silence. They treated me as disposable, a means to their selfish ends. But no more. I wiped my tears, jaw tightening with newfound resolve. I'm going to dismantle every lie they've built. I'm taking back everything they've stolen. Alex nodded solemnly, eyes burning with determination matching mine. "I'll help you. We'll plan this carefully." They taught me silence. Now I would teach them accountability. My family was about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I meticulously crafted our plan. Every step had to be precise, subtle, and devastating, just as their betrayal had been. For the first time in my life, I channeled my pain into clarity, transforming my anger into cold, strategic resolve. The first step was clear: documentation. Late nights became our sanctuary, hunched over laptops, piecing together every hidden truth from the web of lies. I uncovered accounts in my name I never opened, credit cards maxed out on purchases I'd never made, loans taken under my identity, and even insurance policies naming my family as beneficiaries without my consent. Each discovery sharpened my determination and fortified my anger. One evening, as the clock ticked toward midnight, I stared numbly at another newly unearthed loan, $25,000 borrowed against my identity. My father's signature mocked me from the screen, confident and bold. "How could they?" I whispered, voice shaking from anger and disbelief. Alex, sitting beside me, gently squeezed my shoulder. "Because they never expected you to fight back. They've always underestimated you, Maya." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Then, let's make sure that's their biggest mistake." The second step of the plan required careful maneuvering. I contacted a lawyer, Rachel, who specialized in identity fraud and financial abuse. Rachel was compassionate yet fiercely competent, promising she'd guide me every step of the way. "The more evidence you gather," Rachel advised, "the stronger your case will be when we file charges. We need this airtight." So I waited, gathering silent ammunition, credit statements, signed documents, surveillance footage from banks showing my father confidently forging my name, even emails exchanged between Elena and Dad discussing how to keep me unaware. Each revelation felt like a fresh wound, but every piece made me stronger. Meanwhile, life continued outwardly normal. My family believed I'd quietly disappeared into insignificance. Occasionally, Dad sent condescending texts reminding me I owed them for years of accommodation. Elena would casually demand babysitting favors, as if nothing had changed. I ignored them, responding minimally, playing along while Alex and I built our invisible fortress of evidence. Step 3 was the quietest but most crucial, securing financial safety. With Rachel's help, I systematically froze unauthorized accounts, disputed fraudulent charges, and contacted credit bureaus to flag identity theft. Each step dismantled my family's illusion of control, brick by brick. Finally, the night before confronting them directly, Alex and I sat silently, the weight of everything between us. "Are you ready?" Alex asked softly, breaking the stillness. I exhaled slowly, meeting their gaze firmly. "More than ready. I'm done letting them define who I am." Alex smiled gently. "When we walk into that house tomorrow, they'll finally see the Maya I've always known, the strongest person I've ever met." Their words settled warmly within me, igniting courage. Tomorrow wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the dignity they had stolen, reclaiming myself. That night, sleep came surprisingly easy. I dreamed vividly of standing tall before my father, fearless and unshaken, finally silencing his cruel words forever. When morning broke, sunlight poured through Alex's curtains, bathing the room in gold, a perfect day to reclaim my truth. I dressed carefully, every choice deliberate, a sharp suit, hair pulled confidently back, shoulders straight. I stared into the mirror, seeing strength, resilience, and something I'd long forgotten: worth. Alex handed me a folder thick with proof, eyes filled with unwavering support. "You've got this." I took the folder firmly, feeling its comforting weight. My family's lies had thrived in shadows. Now they would be dragged into the light. Today was the day I became their reckoning. When we arrived at my family's apartment, my pulse hammered with a blend of anxiety and anticipation. I stood before the familiar door, folder clutched tightly in my trembling hands. Alex placed a reassuring palm against my back, steadying me. "You're ready," Alex whispered softly. I nodded firmly and knocked, 3 sharp, determined taps. The door opened to reveal my father, his smug confidence dissolving into confusion when he saw me standing tall beside Alex. "Maya? What's this about?" he sneered, attempting dominance immediately. "Accountability," I answered calmly, stepping firmly inside, Alex close behind. The living room fell into tense silence as my mother and Elena looked up from the sofa, their expressions shifting from surprise to mild irritation. Elena's kids paused their noisy play, sensing the heavy tension crackling through the air. "What do you think you're doing barging in like this?" Elena scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Dad already told you, stay out." I ignored her venom, focusing solely on my father, my voice sharp but composed. "I'm here because you've crossed a line that even you can't erase." Dad's eyes narrowed threateningly. "Don't be dramatic. If this is about money, we'll talk later." "No," I interrupted, voice clear and unwavering. "We talk now." Without waiting for his permission, I spread the folder open on the coffee table, revealing a meticulously compiled stack of evidence: credit statements, loan documents, forged signatures, every ugly truth laid bare in bold black ink. My father paled visibly, realization crashing into him like a wave. "What's going on?" Mom whispered, suddenly afraid, eyes darting between Dad and me. "This," I pointed forcefully to the documents, "is every account you've opened in my name, every loan you've illegally taken, every piece of my identity you've stolen." Elena shifted uncomfortably, her bravado faltering. "Maya, this must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstandings," I snapped sharply. "Just lies. And crimes." Dad clenched his jaw tightly, his eyes furious yet desperate. "You've misunderstood. These were just temporary solutions to family needs. You've always been so dramatic, Maya." I leaned forward, eyes blazing with strength I'd never known. "I quit school, worked tirelessly to support this family, sacrificed my dreams for your comfort. And you repaid me by stealing my identity? By humiliating me, making me feel worthless, and then daring to blame me?" Dad's face flushed crimson, his fists clenched as he realized he'd lost control. "Watch your tone," he hissed weakly. Alex stepped forward, voice calm yet piercing. She doesn't owe you respect anymore. You've stolen enough from her. Dad glared at Alex, finally sensing his defeat. This is none of your business. Alex met his glare steadily. It became my business the moment you threw Maya out like trash. Mom's voice trembled. What are you planning to do, Maya? I straightened my spine. Every word deliberate. I'm pressing charges. Identity theft, financial fraud, emotional abuse documented by professionals. You'll face every consequence. Dad sank onto the sofa, visibly shaken, Elena pale beside him. You can't do this, he muttered weakly. I leaned closer, eyes locked onto his. You made me believe I was worthless. But I'm worth more than you ever imagined. You used my silence as your shield, but I won't stay silent anymore. Alex gently touched my shoulder, signaling it was time. I stood tall, facing the people who'd tried to erase me. You built your world on my back, but now it's collapsing, and you only have yourselves to blame. I turned confidently toward the door, leaving the broken silence behind me. Alex followed, closing the door firmly, a symbolic end to the past I'd left inside. As we stepped into the sunlight, a heavy weight lifted from my chest, replaced by strength and clarity. Finally, the tables had turned, and I was no longer the victim, but the victor. In the days following my confrontation, my family's world quickly unraveled. News of my father's fraud spread rapidly through our community. Neighbors who'd once turned their backs, whispering judgmental gossip at my humiliation, now gawked openly at the spectacle of his downfall. I watched from a distance, feeling no joy in their suffering, only a grim sense of justice. The evidence I'd gathered, meticulously reviewed by my lawyer Rachel, proved devastatingly conclusive. Investigators arrived swiftly, seizing paperwork, freezing accounts, and systematically dismantling the financial empire my father had built on stolen identities, mine included. Alex and I sat together one rainy afternoon, sipping coffee and quietly watching the news unfold on my laptop screen. Dad's face flashed across local news websites beneath harsh, condemning headlines. Local man faces charges of fraud and identity theft. Father arrested after daughter's shocking revelations. My heart twisted slightly, not in pity, but at the sheer magnitude of how far he'd fallen. I'd spent my entire life viewing him as untouchable, a powerful, controlling force I'd never dared defy. But seeing him now, handcuffed and humbled, I felt a strange emptiness where fear once lived. You okay? Alex asked softly, noticing my quiet reflection. I sighed deeply, nodding slowly. It's strange. I've dreamed of this moment, but now that it's here, all I feel is relief. Relief that he can't hurt me anymore. Alex gently squeezed my hand. You're finally free, Maya. He doesn't hold power over you now. Elena called me frantically that evening, her voice choked with panic. Maya, what have you done? They've frozen everything. My accounts, Mom's savings, everything. My kids. Elena, I interrupted calmly but firmly, my voice unwavering. Your kids deserve better than lies and theft. You knew what was happening and chose silence. But I'm your sister, she pleaded desperately. Yes, I answered quietly. And that's exactly why your betrayal hurt even more. She fell silent, finally comprehending the depth of her complicity. I didn't realize how bad. You never wanted to, I said, voice trembling slightly. You all made it so easy to ignore me. I hung up gently, feeling both sadness and closure. They'd ignored my cries for years, silenced my pain, mocked my attempts to matter. Now, when their comfortable lies crumbled, they desperately demanded empathy they'd never given me. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time, her voice broken, barely recognizable. Maya, please reconsider. We're losing everything. I swallowed hard, refusing to waver. You lost me first, Mom. You just didn't care enough to notice. I ended the call, heart aching yet oddly serene. Years of silent suffering had taught me strength. They'd intended to break me, yet ironically forged me into steel. Days later, I stood silently in the courtroom as the charges were formally read against my father: fraud, forgery, identity theft, financial abuse. He stood stoically, unable to look at me, finally stripped of his manipulative pride. The judge's words rang clearly, delivering the justice I'd once thought impossible. You betrayed trust, exploited innocence, and showed no remorse. The court finds you guilty. I exhaled slowly, tension finally releasing from my shoulders. Alex stood beside me, steadfast and supportive as always. As Dad was escorted from the courtroom, our eyes met briefly. For the first time, his gaze held no threat, no disdain, only defeated emptiness. I felt no satisfaction, only quiet closure. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored around us, their questions blending into meaningless noise. Alex shielded me gently, guiding me toward the waiting car. Once inside, the silence comforted me, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I leaned my head against the window, rain trickling down the glass, washing away years of pain. My family's world had shattered completely, collapsing under the weight of their own cruelty. But mine was finally beginning, rebuilt on truth, strength, and freedom. With the toxic foundation of my old life finally demolished, I turned my energy toward creating something genuinely mine, something built from truth, respect, and purpose. Every step forward felt like reclaiming stolen parts of myself, filling the void they'd left with strength I never knew existed. Alex and I moved into a modest but beautiful new apartment downtown, far from the shadows of the past. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating bare walls that soon filled with photos of laughter, joy, and peace. I found work quickly, an administrative job at a women's shelter that empowered survivors of abuse and financial exploitation. Each day spent there was deeply healing, giving purpose to my past pain. Weeks turned to months, and my confidence grew steadily. The quiet girl who once believed she was worthless had transformed into a woman who spoke clearly, acted deliberately, and never again allowed others to define her value. I counseled women who'd suffered as I had, watching with pride as they reclaimed their own voices, inspired by my journey. One evening after work, Alex surprised me with a small celebration: candles, flowers, and a home-cooked dinner. "What's all this?" I asked, laughing softly as I entered our apartment, warmth blossoming in my chest. Alex smiled broadly, handing me an envelope embossed with gold lettering. "Open it." Curious, I tore the envelope open, pulling out a crisp certificate: acceptance into the Women's Advocacy and Leadership Program. "I applied secretly," Alex explained gently, eyes shining with pride. "I knew you'd be perfect." My heart swelled, tears pricking my eyes as I stared at the document. I never imagined I'd be someone who could lead others. Alex shook their head gently, sincerity glowing in their eyes. "Maya, you've always been a leader. Your family just worked hard to make you forget. This is who you've always meant to be." I embraced Alex tightly, gratitude washing over me. The program offered specialized training in advocacy, law, and public speaking, skills I'd once thought beyond my reach, now perfectly aligned with my newfound purpose. The following months passed quickly, filled with late-night study sessions, challenging courses, and deeply rewarding community work. I learned not just about advocacy, but about myself, my capacity for empathy, resilience, and strength. Speaking at events became second nature, my voice ringing clear and confident as I empowered others to break free from their own cages of silence. News of my success spread quietly but steadily. Unexpectedly, Elena reached out again, her voice subdued yet sincere. "Maya, I've been watching you," she began hesitantly. "Everything you're doing, it's inspiring." I paused, guarded yet curious. "Why call now, Elena?" She sighed deeply, vulnerability creeping into her tone. "I was jealous of your strength, afraid to admit how cruel we'd been. But seeing you rise, it's taught me courage. I'm finally leaving, Maya. Leaving Dad's shadow, leaving the lies." Her admission surprised me, stirring complex emotions. "I'm glad," I said softly, meaning every word. It won't be easy, Elena, but freedom never is. I know, she whispered gratefully. Maybe one day I'll earn your forgiveness. After we hung up, I sat quietly, reflecting. Elena had a long path ahead, but her step toward honesty felt oddly comforting. Perhaps my courage had rippled outward, challenging others to confront their truths. Later that evening, Alex found me lost in thought. Everything okay? I smiled warmly, nodding gently. Better than okay. I'm finally at peace. Alex squeezed my hand, silent support filling the comfortable quiet between us. I'd been shattered, silenced, and nearly erased, but now I'd rebuilt myself, stronger than ever, leading others toward their own freedom. My family had tried to define me by weakness, but I'd chosen to rise. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my future. And no one could ever take that from me again. Nearly a year after the night my father threw my belongings into that cold hallway, I stood confidently at the podium of a crowded community center, my heart steady, my spirit strong. Around me, faces glowed with anticipation, women I'd counseled, community leaders, even some former neighbors who'd once witnessed my humiliation and now eagerly awaited my voice. My eyes scanned the audience, and then I saw her, my mother, sitting quietly in the back row, a shadow of the proud woman I'd known. Elena sat beside her, eyes wide with uncertain hope. Their presence startled me momentarily, but I quickly steadied myself, breathing deeply. Their eyes carried regret, understanding, and perhaps the first genuine respect they'd ever shown me. I spoke clearly, voice unwavering as I recounted my journey. Painful truths mingled with triumphant victories. I described the dark moments of betrayal, humiliation, and emotional abuse. Yet I also spoke of strength, resilience, and ultimately redemption. Some people thrive by convincing you that you're nothing, I said firmly, my voice filling every corner of the room. They silence you because they fear the power you hold when you finally speak. Eyes glistened with recognition and tears around the room. My mother's had dropped slightly, shoulders trembling gently. Elena looked directly at me, openly weeping, her regret palpable. But your worth doesn't diminish because others refuse to see it, I continued softly. You deserve love, respect, dignity. Not because you earn them, but because you simply exist. Applause filled the room, thunderous and heartfelt. When I stepped down from the podium, hands reached out gratefully, hugs tight with shared pain and hope. Slowly, the crowd dispersed until only my mother and Elena remained, lingering hesitantly near the exit. I approached slowly, meeting their anxious gazes calmly. I didn't expect you here. My mother's eyes filled with remorse. We owed you this much. Maya, I should have protected you. You should have. I agreed gently but firmly. You should have stood by me. You should have seen me. But you didn't. Her face crumpled slightly, guilt etched deeply into her eyes. I'm so sorry. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me finally release, resentment dissolving into compassion. I forgive you, not because you've earned it, but because I refuse to carry this pain any longer. My mother nodded quietly, understanding the weight of my words. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Can we ever rebuild, Maya? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Maybe, but it won't look like before. It has to be based on truth, respect, and honesty. No more silence, no more pretending. Elena nodded earnestly. I promise. As they left quietly, I felt lighter than ever, finally closing that chapter. Turning, I saw Alex standing nearby, watching me with gentle pride. You're incredible, Alex whispered, pulling me into a comforting embrace. Later, as we walked slowly home beneath the starlit sky, Alex glanced at me curiously. How do you feel? I smiled softly, breathing deeply. Free. At home, I stood in front of the mirror, reflecting on everything I'd overcome. The girl I'd once been, quiet, obedient, invisible, no longer stared back. Instead, I saw a woman shaped by pain, yet strengthened by her fight. They'd thrown me away, believing I'd never rise. But here I stood, stronger than ever, my voice loud, clear, and unapologetic. They once told me to shut my mouth and stay out of family matters, but I learned the most powerful revenge wasn't silence, bitterness, or anger. It was becoming everything they'd feared I could be: strong, proud, respected, and free. As I closed my eyes that night, peace enveloped me like a comforting blanket, washing away the last remnants of pain. Their cruelty had nearly destroyed me, but my courage saved me, and that was my sweetest revenge. It wasn't just a car. It was the last thing my mother touched with love, and now it was covered in jagged scratches that sliced through the paint like they were trying to erase her. My name is Clara, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever felt like someone spit on something you bled for, like your grief, your love, your memory meant absolutely nothing? The damage stretched across the hood in angry arcs, raw and deliberate. My legs went numb. I couldn't breathe. The car, my mother's vintage 1969 Mustang, was more than just steel and wheels. It was the only thing she left me when cancer took her, a restoration project we never got to finish together. But I had finished it. I spent months saving every penny, sanding every corner, repainting it myself in the exact shade of sky blue she loved. I poured my heartbreak into every inch, like maybe if I got it right, I could bring a part of her back. And now it looked like someone had taken a key and carved cruelty into my mother's memory. Whoa! A voice rang out behind me, casual, careless. Didn't mean for you to cry about it. It's just a car. I turned slowly. Dylan, my neighbor's teenage son, barely 18, with that smug, dead-eyed stare only someone who's never known consequences could wear. He was holding a can of soda, his shirt half-tucked, like he'd just rolled out of bed to watch my pain from the comfort of his porch. It looked old anyway, he added with a shrug, before slurping from the can. I stared at him. I couldn't even speak. I couldn't scream. If I did, I knew I'd cry and he'd win. So I didn't say a word. I just turned around, climbed into the driver's seat, and drove away with shaking hands and a roaring storm behind my ribcage. He thought I left because I was weak. He thought I'd just go inside, cry into a pillow, and come back tomorrow pretending nothing happened. He didn't know me at all. Because that night I didn't cry. I didn't sleep either. Instead, I sat in my living room with the lights off and stared at the photo on the wall. Me and Mom leaning against that same Mustang, both of us grinning like the world couldn't touch us. He touched it. He scratched the only thing I had left of her. And tomorrow he was going to understand exactly what that meant. Not through violence, not through screaming, but through something colder, something smarter, something permanent. I wasn't going to destroy him. I was going to teach him. And the first lesson? You don't spit on someone's pain and walk away whole. Dylan had always been that kid. You know the type, the one who breaks your window playing baseball and laughs when you ask him to pay for it. The one who speeds down the street at midnight blasting music, then smirks when you ask him to keep it down. He was chaos wrapped in entitlement, and everyone on our street knew it. But no one said anything, because his parents were the loudest, wealthiest voices in the neighborhood. His father, Greg, was the HOA president. His mother, Sandy, hosted the annual 4th of July barbecue, acting like she was royalty because she made potato salad with truffle oil. They wore their money like armor, and they used it to shield Dylan from every consequence life tried to hand him. Me? I was just the quiet girl across the street with paint-stained jeans and grease under her nails. After Mom died, I didn't have the energy to keep up appearances. The grief hit me like a slow, suffocating wave. My friends drifted away, unsure of what to say. I lost my job at the art studio when I took too many days off. People offered condolences and casseroles, then went back to their routines. But I stayed broken. And that Mustang was the only thing that kept me from falling apart completely. It had been her dream, something she and her father worked on when she was a teenager. After he passed, she parked it in our garage and left it untouched for years. When she got sick, we started working on it again together, on days when she felt strong enough to lift a wrench. She used to say, "We'll finish it together. And when it runs again, we'll drive until the sun disappears." She died before we could. So I picked up where she left off. Every day, after cleaning houses or delivering groceries to make ends meet, I'd spend my nights sanding, sealing, polishing. I learned everything I could about vintage cars. I took online classes. I bartered with mechanics, traded artwork for parts. I fought for that car like it was the only war I had left to win. And when I finally turned that engine over for the first time, it felt like she was sitting right next to me, smiling. That's what Dylan scratched. That's what he mocked. The first time Dylan made a cruel joke about my ancient junkyard project, I brushed it off. He had no idea what it meant. But as time passed, and he saw the car come back to life, his jabs grew sharper. "Still pretending your mom's in that bucket of bolts," he said once, laughing with his idiot friends. I stayed quiet, because some battles aren't worth starting. But the moment I saw what he'd done to the paint, deep, messy swirls right over the passenger door, where my mother used to rest her hand, that silence cracked. And something cold and calculated grew in its place. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about teaching him what respect costs when you don't give it freely. And I already knew what he valued most. Because just like I spent every spare second with my Mustang, Dylan had his own obsession. That loud, chrome-drenched motorcycle he worshipped. The one he thought made him untouchable. I smiled that night. Not out of happiness, but purpose. He scratched my memory. I was about to mess with his reflection. The next morning, I walked outside and stared at the Mustang. The scratches were still there, mocking me in daylight. I ran my fingers gently over the grooves, feeling the damage all the way in my chest. But this time, I wasn't shaken. I was measuring. Across the street, Dylan's garage door was open. His precious motorcycle gleamed under the morning sun like it was on display at an auto show. Matte black, gold accents, custom exhaust. A Ducati, I'd learned. Gifted on his 18th birthday. His parents didn't care that he hadn't graduated, had no job, and had a rap sheet of noise complaints. As long as he stayed out of jail and looked cool doing it, they were proud. He cleaned that bike daily. Waxed it with microfiber cloths. Posted filtered pictures of it online like it was some kind of deity. He even parked it diagonally in the driveway, like he wanted the whole street to admire it. But I didn't care how shiny it was. I cared about what was underneath. And that's when I started watching. Over the next few days, I observed Dylan like a scientist studying a lab rat. I noticed the pattern. He always parked half a foot over the sidewalk, illegal, but unnoticed. He never locked the bike properly, just left it with the kickstand down, confident no one would dare touch it. And then I remembered something. A week earlier, while repainting the Mustang's side mirror, I'd glanced across the street and noticed an envelope tucked under Dylan's windshield. A parking violation. One he crumpled and threw into his trash without even reading. I dug deeper. A few minutes on the city's public violation database revealed more than I expected. 6 unpaid tickets, 1 expired registration, and 2 complaints filed against him for reckless driving. One of them detailed an incident where he nearly hit a child on a scooter. Suddenly, the situation expanded in my mind like a puzzle snapping into focus. This wasn't just a spoiled brat who keyed my car. This was a pattern. A trail of destruction left behind by a kid who thought consequences were myths made up for poor people. But the deeper I dug, the more I started seeing something I hadn't expected. He didn't just behave like someone who didn't care. He behaved like someone who couldn't afford to care. The flashy bike? Still under a payment plan. The insurance? Spotty. The house? Recently refinanced. Greg and Sandy weren't the high-rolling suburban royalty they pretended to be. Their empire was held together with credit cards, charm, and denial. And Dylan? He wasn't rich. He just grew up believing he was untouchable. I copied everything. Screenshots. VIN numbers. License plate records. I kept them in a secure folder on a drive labeled simply, Rebuild. Because that's what I was doing now. Not just fixing my car, but rebuilding the version of me that let people like Dylan laugh at my pain and walk away. I didn't want to damage his bike. I wanted him to feel what I felt. That hollow collapse in your chest when something you love is stripped from you, not out of rage, but out of utter, cold indifference. I was done crying. It was time he learned how it feels to be erased. And when he walked outside the next morning, the real lesson would begin. The day before I made my move, I drove the Mustang across town to my cousin Nate's auto shop. He was one of the few people who knew how much the car meant to me. When he saw the scratches, he didn't ask questions, just set down his coffee and walked straight to the damage. "Someone did this on purpose," he muttered, jaw tight. I nodded silently. "Can you fix it without touching the rest of the finish? I don't want the car to lose her character." He smiled gently, like he understood something deeper. "I got you." I left the Mustang in his care, took a rideshare home, and set the real plan in motion. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. Not violence. Not destruction. That would have made me like Dylan. No, I wanted consequence. Real consequence. The kind that sticks. That night, I stayed up crafting an airtight, legal revenge. I uploaded all the documentation I'd gathered. Dylan's unpaid tickets, expired registration, reckless driving reports, and photos of his illegal parking to a secure cloud folder. Then I submitted a full complaint to the city parking authority through their enforcement portal. But I didn't stop there. Using a vehicle's VIN, I cross-checked with the state's insurance verification system. His coverage had lapsed, which meant if he so much as touched that bike on public property, he was operating illegally. By morning, I'd sent the full dossier, complete with time-stamped photos and video, to 3 departments: parking enforcement, the DMV, and the local traffic division. I made sure every agency with authority over that bike had what they needed. But I saved one final detail for myself. You see, Dylan always parked on the edge of his driveway, just enough to hang over the sidewalk. That's not just inconsiderate, it's a safety hazard. One that qualified for immediate towing under city code, especially for unregistered vehicles. And lucky for me, a friend from a women's car restoration forum worked dispatch for a private towing service. I sent her everything. Not as a favor, just the facts. She replied, "Got it. We'll swing by early. If it's still there and matches what you said, it's gone." I barely slept that night. Not from nerves, but anticipation. I kept picturing that smug look Dylan gave me when he said, "It looked old anyway." He thought I was beneath him, that I'd do nothing. But what he didn't realize was, when you destroy something built from grief and love, you don't just face anger. You face precision. At 5:42 a.m., I sat on my front porch wrapped in a blanket, sipping coffee. At 6:03, the tow truck pulled up. Quiet. Efficient. By 6:07, the bike was gone. They didn't ring the doorbell. They didn't make noise. They just hoisted it up like they were lifting a corpse. At 6:08, I walked back inside. And at exactly 7:14 a.m., I heard the sound of Dylan's garage opening, followed by the most satisfying silence I'd ever experienced. No shouting. No swearing. Just silence. That empty, panic silence when someone realizes the world doesn't bend for them anymore. He ran back inside. Moments later, I watched from the window as Greg came out in pajama pants, phone pressed to his ear, pacing furiously in the driveway. They were calling every number they could find. But they wouldn't find that bike anytime soon, because that bike didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to the system. And the system doesn't play favorites. By noon, our quiet suburban street buzzed with something it hadn't felt in years. Discomfort. Delicious. Thick discomfort that clung to every fence post and mailbox. The neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering like pigeons around a dropped piece of bread. Greg's voice boomed across the driveway. "No, listen, this is outrageous. That bike cost over 20 grand. There has to be some mistake." Dylan stood behind him, pacing like a trapped animal, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and confusion. His confidence was gone.
Just like the bike.
I sat on my porch, flipping through a book I wasn't reading, sipping sweet tea I didn't even want. I didn't look their way, didn't smile, didn't blink. I didn't need to, because nothing says you lost like silence. "Clara." Sandy finally called out, her voice tight and sugary. "Did you see anything this morning?" "The bike. Someone must have stolen it." I looked up, slowly. "Oh." I said, feigning innocence. You mean the motorcycle that was illegally parked with expired tags and no visible registration sticker? That one. Her face cracked slightly. Well, I don't know about the registration. I think the city's enforcing sidewalk codes more strictly lately, I added casually. But then again, people really should keep up with their documentation. Especially when they've had, what? 6 months of unpaid violations. Greg's jaw clenched. You knew this was going to happen. I tilted my head. I knew you were overdue for a reality check. Dylan finally snapped. You snitched on me over a car? It was a scratch. You're that pathetic. I stood. That one word, pathetic, was a match on dry wood. I stepped toward him slowly, one step at a time, eyes locked on his like he was a roach that had crawled across my kitchen counter. You didn't scratch a car, Dylan, I said, voice low but vibrating with fire. You vandalized the last piece of my mother I had left. You mocked her memory. You laughed at my grief. And now you're finally feeling something close to the weight I've carried since the day she died. His eyes darted to his parents, searching for backup. None came. Greg and Sandy stood frozen, silent for once. Sandy's arms were crossed. Greg looked like he might speak, then thought better of it. Dylan tried again. It's just a bike, okay? You didn't have to destroy me over it. No, I said. I didn't destroy you. I let your own actions do that. He was quiet. Consider this a small sample, I continued. Because the next time you try to stomp on someone's grief, you might not be lucky enough to learn your lesson with just a toe and a public record. I turned and walked away, heartbeat steady, the heavy finality of justice crackling behind me like thunder. By the end of the day, Dylan's bike had been towed to an impound 2 cities away. Between the fines, fees, overdue citations, and registration violations, they'd have to cough up over $4,000 to reclaim it, and that didn't include the late charges or insurance issues now tangled in red tape. His social media went dark. His bike god persona erased overnight. The same neighbors who used to laugh at his loud jokes now whispered behind his back, shaking their heads. And me? I drove my freshly restored Mustang down the street at sunset, windows rolled down, stereo playing softly, same song Mom used to hum when we worked on the car together. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't grieving. I was free. It didn't take long for the cracks to spread. By the end of the week, Dylan's face looked more hollow than smug. The same guy who strutted around shirtless while revving his engine at 6 a.m. now walked with his head down, earbuds in, trying to blend into the background. But shame has a scent, and our street had a strong nose. The tow company refused to release the bike until all charges were cleared. When Greg tried to argue his way through it, the city slapped on a vehicle lien notice. The bike was no longer theirs. Not unless they wanted to cough up everything in full. Neighbors whispered. The woman 2 doors down who used to flirt with Greg at barbecues started waving at me instead. Mr. Taylor, who always tolerated Dylan's loud music with clenched teeth, now grinned every time I started the Mustang. Greg tried to save face by filing a complaint with the HOA, accusing me of creating a hostile environment. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. He didn't expect me to show up at the board meeting, dressed in a blazer, a stack of documentation under my arm. I'm happy to walk you through the city ordinances your son violated, I said calmly. Or maybe we should discuss how your unpaid fines technically violate HOA compliance rules? The silence that followed was everything I needed. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. Dylan, stripped of his social image, tried rebuilding his confidence online, posting old photos, recycled captions. But the comments were brutal. His friends had moved on. No one came to his defense. The joke was over.
And he was the punchline.
At home, things only worsened. I watched Sandy slam the door on Greg's face during one of their shouting matches. Word spread that they were struggling financially. The house, once the pride of the block with its perfectly trimmed hedges and luxury cars, started to look tired. The lights stayed off longer. Deliveries stopped. No more catered lunches. No more parties. And Dylan? He got a job. A real one. At the car wash off Route 7. I found out because I happened to stop there on a Saturday, mud clinging to my tires after a long drive. He didn't see me until I rolled down the window. Our eyes met. For a second, I thought he might pretend not to recognize me. But then he nodded. Just once. And walked around to scrub my windshield. There was no smugness. No smirk. Just quiet focus.
He didn't speak.
I tipped generously. Not because I wanted to humiliate him, but because I knew what it meant to start over. To rebuild. I wasn't looking to ruin him. I wanted to shake him awake. And I did. When I drove away, I saw him pause at the edge of the parking lot. Hands on his hips, face tilted up to the sky like he was trying to catch his breath. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. But I knew he felt it.
The shift.
The weight. The accountability. Everything he took from me, I took back. Not with violence. With truth. With justice. And with a kind of silence that speaks louder than rage ever could. After everything, peace didn't come all at once. It came in moments. Quiet ones. I'd wake up early and sit on the porch with my coffee, the Mustang gleaming in the driveway. I'd hear birds instead of revving engines. No more sharp whistles from Dylan. No more Sandy's forced good mornings.
Just calm. Space. Breath.
And for the first time in years, I filled that space with something real. Myself. I took a part-time job at a local restoration garage that specialized in vintage cars. The owner, Miss Dottie, was in her late 60s with a braid down to her waist and a voice like gravel and honey. When I told her about my Mustang and my mother, she gave me a long look and said, "We'll be good for each other." And we were. During the day, I got my hands dirty, pulling engines apart, repainting chipped doors, learning things I'd never had the confidence to ask before. At night, I worked on launching my own side project, a nonprofit initiative for women learning auto restoration. Not just for cars, but for healing. A place where grief and grease could mix, where people like me could find power in what they built with their hands. We called it Her Drive. Alex, a close friend from high school I'd reconnected with during the storm, helped me build the website. And Nate, my cousin, donated the first tool set. Within 3 months, we had 10 women in our program. All of them had stories.
Loss.
Trauma. Anger. And all of them left every Saturday class with grease under their nails and a little more strength in their eyes. One day, Miss Dottie pulled me aside. "You know," she said, wiping her hands on a rag, "some people live their whole lives never getting to turn pain into purpose. You didn't just fix a car, Clara. You turned your mother's memory into motion." That stayed with me. Even the Mustang began to feel different. Not just a monument to grief, but a companion on the road I was carving forward. I no longer drove it to remember her. I drove it because it made me feel alive. And as for Dylan, he kept his distance. Sometimes I saw him walking past the shop on his way to work, helmet in hand, head down. The new bike he rode wasn't nearly as flashy. He didn't rev it. He didn't pose for pictures. But he wore a mechanic's uniform now. He was earning his own way. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was growth. I didn't need to know.
What mattered was that I had changed.
I wasn't the girl who stood silently while someone laughed at her pain. I was the woman who turned that pain into power, into community, into something that lived beyond her own healing. And maybe, in some strange way, Dylan had given me the final push to become that version of myself. But he'd never take credit for it. This was mine. All of it. 6 months after the bike was towed, I received a letter. Handwritten. The envelope had my name carefully penned across the front. No return address. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, or maybe closure, pulled me in. Inside was a single page. Neat handwriting. No excuses. Just this. "Clara, I know saying sorry doesn't fix the damage I caused. And I won't pretend to understand what that car meant to you, but I see it now. I see the weight behind what I dismissed. You didn't just take my bike. You made me face myself. And you were right. No one's ever held me accountable before. But you did. And because of that, I'm trying. I'm taking classes at the community college. I'm working nights. I paid off the fees. The bike's gone, and that's fine. Honestly, it was never mine to begin with. Not really. It was just something I used to hide behind. Thank you for showing me I couldn't hide anymore. Dylan. I read it once, then again. And the third time I folded it slowly, set it inside the glove box of the Mustang, and closed it with care. Because that letter didn't undo what happened. But it did something better. It proved that silence can echo louder than rage. That dignity can disarm arrogance. And that sometimes the real revenge isn't breaking someone, but waking them up. That Sunday, I took the Mustang out to the edge of town, to the long winding road that hugs the coast. It was Mom's favorite stretch, where she used to say, "Let the sky remind you that grief doesn't last forever." I drove for miles with the windows down, wind in my hair, the sun slicing through the clouds just the way she liked it. At a quiet overlook, I parked and stepped out. The ocean roared below, like a living heart. I laid a single photo on the dashboard. Mom, in her denim overalls, arms crossed, standing next to the Mustang when it was just rust and bones. Then I whispered, "We finished it, Mom. She's ready." I smiled, not the smile of someone who won, but someone who healed. Behind me, the sound of an engine approached. A familiar one. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. Dylan pulled into the lot slowly, his bike quiet, his helmet removed with care. He parked on the opposite end, far from me, respectful. He didn't try to talk.
He didn't wave.
He just looked at the view, then at the car, then nodded once. Then he turned and left. That was all. No grand apologies. No theatrics. Just a small, quiet recognition. And that was enough. Because this story didn't need a loud ending. It began with pain, but it ends with growth. With clarity. With power returned to where it belonged.
To me.
They say revenge is best served cold. But I disagree. Revenge, real revenge, is served quietly, in the form of a life rebuilt, a legacy restored, and the peace that comes when you've risen beyond the reach of those who tried to break you. I didn't need to ruin his life. I just needed to reclaim mine. And I did. 1 mile at a time.